Hello and welcome. Thanks for watching this video. In this video, we are going to talk about Azure storage. What are different services Azure provides for our storage needs and how do they differ from each other? What are the benefits of using Azure storage platform and why one should go for Azure storage platform? And in the end, we'll go and log into Microsoft Azure platform and then we'll see the demo. So first, let's see what is Azure storage platform. So it is Microsoft's cloud storage solution for all your data storage needs in today's era. It provides highly available and highly scalable store for your different needs such as data objects which can be stored in the form of blobs, disk storage for virtual machines that you can attach, a file system service on cloud, or also a messaging store for your asynchronous application components and you can use it as a queuing mechanism, and also NoSQL data store as well. So that is what Azure storage platform provides you, different kinds of services for your needs. But now why one should go for Azure storage? What are the benefits of using it? So let us consider a scenario where you have an application that is used to store customers data such as images, videos, PDFs, etc. So imagine you are not on cloud and application is hosted on premises. So you are then managing the data that user has uploaded through your application. So in this case, whatever storage mechanism that you are going to use will have some or the other limitation. So consider you have decided to store customers data on a server that you are managing. Now what if there is a failure on server and data is unavailable for an instance? So do you have the strategy to be available? So now if your customer has increased, so now you want to scale out and have your storage needs satisfied, so how easily it can be done? And the next is you need to secure all your data in your server, so that is what you have to manage the security patches and all the updates that you have on server, that is also what you have to manage. So that is the maintenance of your server, also how easily you can access your data from any part of the world easily, and that too securely. So that is also what are the questions that you need to ask when you are using the on-premises solution. So now you see how many things need to be done if you use on-premises solution for your storage needs. So now let us consider the benefits of using Azure storage. So the services that Azure storage provides are basically durable and highly available. So your data is copied multiple times to ensure safety in the event of any hardware failure. Also, it is replicated across the regions to be safe from natural disaster. So at least you have 6 copies of your data that is present. So you can choose from that option, and your data is highly available in this case. Azure storage is massively scalable and it is not a problem for today's world's need. So scalability is not at all a problem in case of Azure storage. And when it comes to security, so all your data returned to these services is actually encrypted at a rest. These are completely managed services, so you don't have to manage any of the hardware infrastructure, you don't have to maintain any of them. And when it comes to the accessibility part, so data in Azure is accessible over HTTP and HTTPS protocol using client libraries that you can use from different languages such as .NET, Java, Python, etc. So these are some benefits of using cloud solution for your data storage needs. So now we saw what are the difference between using on-prem solution and Azure storage solution and how beneficial it is to use Azure storage platform. So before we move to different Azure storage services, it is important to talk about different data categories. So we may have different data based on our needs, so it is important to understand what data categories are present so that we will know which Azure storage service provides facility that fits our need. So as shown here, there are three categories: structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data. So for structured data, the data types are clearly defined and whose pattern makes them easily searchable. So structured data usually resides in relational databases. So the example could be any financial data, air reservation system, and the data can be human generated or machine generated as long as the data is created with defined schema in RDBMS. And the second is the semi-structured data, so it generally has a ad hoc schema and a less organized field. So this usually maintains internal tagging or the markings that identify separate data elements. So this data is actually non-relational and no SQL format and cannot be stored in table rows or columns. So the example could be JSON data, XML data, block data, documents, etc. The third is unstructured data, which has no specific schema as such and is comprised of data that is not easily searchable. So you can say unstructured data is essentially everything else. Unstructured data has an internal structure but is not structured via predefined data schema. So internally it may have some kind of a structure, but it is not designated with any kind of a schema as such. So the example could be the PDF files, images, or the videos. So these are few categories of different data. Now I'll talk about Azure Storage Services, which provides multiple services such as disks, files, blobs, tables, and queues. So Azure Disk provides us persistent data storage mechanism for our virtual machines. It allows data to be persistently stored and accessed from an attached virtual hard disk. Now the question is, when should we use Azure Disk? So the answer is whenever you have a need to store data that is not required to be accessed from outside the VM to which the disk is attached. So in this case you can go for Azure Disk. Now Azure Files provides a way for cloud file shares, so which is completely a managed service, and these files can be accessed from anywhere via the industry standard server message block protocol, that is SMB protocol. So you can mount Azure file shares from cloud or on premises as well. So when should we go for Azure files? So for example, if you want to just lift and shift an application to cloud that was using native file system APIs to share the data between it and other application in Azure, so you want to communicate between such data and the different applications that are present in Azure. So in this case you can go for Azure files. Now Azure Blob is the important of all the services. It allows unstructured data to be stored and accessed at a massive scale. It can be text or binary data. So the example could be images, videos, etc. So when should we go for Azure Blob? So whenever you want your application to access data from anywhere and you want to decouple the data and the application, so you can go for blobs. Now the Azure table, so it will allow you to store structured NoSQL data in the cloud with a schemaless design. And here do not get confused with your SQL tables with these tables. So these are NoSQL data with schemaless design, which has entities in table. More common scenarios for Azure tables are like you can use it for the data for web apps, address books, or other metadata of your services. So in that case you can go for Azure tables. Now the Azure queues are used to store messages in a queue for asynchronous processing. So whenever you want to go for asynchronous processing, you can use queues. So this is used for queuing mechanism, and basically this is used for the fire and forget model and for decoupling components for the communication. So there is one more option for queues, which is service bus queues, which is different than the storage queues that we are talking about right now. So on a high level, these are the services that Azure Storage provides you, which are disk, files, blobs, tables, and the queue. So depending on your needs, you can just use the services. Now if you notice, then the disk and the files are basically the services that comes under infrastructure as a service, and blobs, tables, and the queues are the services that comes under platform as a service. So you are actually using the file server and you are using the disk, which is the infrastructure as a service, and the blobs and the tables and the queues are the platforms that you have for the storage needs. So now we talked about the different services. So now let's talk about the storage account. So whenever you want to leverage any service, so first thing is you need to create a storage account, and storage account will provide you four services, which is blob service, table service, queue service, and the file service. So when you want to use a blob service, then you will first create a container. So container is like a folder structure where your data will reside. So this is like a folder structure where within the folders you will create data which can be any binary data. So this is known as a blobs. So similarly for table as well, you are going to create a table first, and within the table you are going to store data. So this is basically schemaless design or the NoSQL data that you will store in the table, and this data is known as the entities. For the queue as well, you are going to create a queue first, and you are going to store messages into the this particular queue. So to connect your components application and talk asynchronously, so you will create a queue, and within that queue you are going to store messages. And similarly for Azure files as well, you are going to create the files like a structure where you are sharing that files, so by using the SMB protocol. So that is how you are going to store files as well. So this is how Azure has created a similar structure for all of these types of services purposely, whether it is a container, table, queues, or SMB. So now we have seen what is Azure storage and what are the different kinds of services that Azure storage provides, and how you can use these services in particular scenario. Now let's try to log into Azure portal and see how we can create those. Now I'm logged into Azure portal. I'll go and create a storage account. As we discussed, storage account is an umbrella where your services will reside. So first thing is we need to create a storage account. So I have created resource group here, and I'll give storage account name. This storage account has to be unique across Azure because you're going to use this name as a part of your endpoint URL. And now for performance you can choose standard or premier. So I'll keep performance as the standard for now. Account kind is basically storage general purpose v2 or v1. So in most of the cases we are going to use general purpose v2. So now the most important is replication. So this will tell how your data gets replicated or gets copied across the regions. So you can see there are multiple options that you can choose from. So we need to consider that there are basically primary and the secondary regions that are available. So if you are creating any resources in a region A, then the closest region to that particular region A is 100 miles away, but that is paired with some kind of a region, so that is known as the secondary region. So every region present across the world has a secondary region paired with, so that is a secondary region associated. So depending on whatever primary region that you choose, so it has a secondary region associated to that. So now locally redundant storage, if we choose this option, so it will tell that you have to replicate your data 3 times within the primary region and within the same physical location. So your data gets replicated within the same physical location. So that those 3 copies will use the same same power, same cooling, and every other infrastructure. And if we choose zone redundant storage, so you are going to use the same primary region, but now you are going to replicate your data with the 3 availability zone. So that means all of the zones will use their independent cooling, independent power, independent storage, everything that will be independent. So now in this case you are going to replicate data 3 times with availability zones. Now if we choose geo redundant storage, so this will basically create a 3 copies within the primary region, and also it will create 3 copies within the physical location of secondary region as well. So you will have a 6 copies in this case, but in case of zone redundant, you will have 3 copies present in the primary region. So there are multiple ways you can replicate your data. So I'll choose locally redundant storage for now, and access tier will tell you how your data gets accessed. So if your data is getting accessed frequently, you are supposed to create a hot access tier, but if your data is not accessed frequently and that needs to be stored at least 30 days, so for that reason you are going to create a cool access tier for that particular account. So now I'm going to create hard as the access tier. Now in networking you will see the connectivity method. You have the public endpoint, that means all of the networks, anyone on the internet can access your storage account. And if you choose public endpoint, which is a selected network, so that will tell that it will be a more secure and only selected networks can access your storage account. So if you see, once we select this option, then there is a pop-up, there is an option to create a virtual network comes up. So that means you have to create a virtual private network within the Azure, and private endpoint will be basically more secure than all of those options. So now I'll keep public endpoint as for this particular demo. So for the data protection, you have multiple options. Whether you want to turn on the soft delete the blob. So soft delete basically enables you to recover blobs that were previously marked for deletion. So if you delete it, so first it will be soft deleted, and for a particular period of time it will be present, but after that it gets deleted. So that's how you can have multiple options. And there are also options for us how to transfer, secure transfer is required or not. So I'll keep all those options as is, and the tags I'll just review and create. Let's create the storage account. So the storage account is created after a minute or so. So let's go to resource. So now the account is created. So if you see, we have four services present in storage account: the container service, which is a blob service, the file shares, tables, and the queues. So let's try to create a containers first. As we discussed, containers are basically similar to what is a folder structure. So let's say I'm going to create receipts. Now this container is created, so now we can upload data over here. So now we have uploaded the data, which is a txt file, so you can store any binary data over here. If I just click on this file, you can see the type here is a blob. You can download this file from here, you can delete it, and you can change the access tier from here as well. And also you can notice here that the properties, the URL for this particular blob is here, which is the name of the storage account that you give .blob.core.windows.net. So that will be the URL of your storage account. So that's why the name of the storage account has to be unique across the Azure. So this is the URL that you will be using for accessing any of the data that you have. So if I just click on copy and click here, now it says that the specific resource is not present. So now if we just go here, the reason for this is that the access level for this particular blob is basically private, so you are not going to access it directly from the browser. So if I just click on blob access and click on OK, and if I just refresh this window, now I can access this particular blob. So that is how you can change the access level. So by default it was private, and you are not going to access it publicly. So now if I just click on this particular file, and if we just go to this option which is acquire lease, so this basically tells that you're going to acquire a lease. You're just having a lease on that particular blob present. So if I just click on acquire lease, so we have successfully acquired the lease on the following blob. So now if I just click on this option, and if you see, the delete option is disabled. So the meaning of acquire lease is that the particular blob that has got the lease acquired by somebody, so you won't be able to change the data of that particular blob. You won't be able to delete that blob. You can even actually go and see the blob, but you cannot modify or delete that particular blob. So that is the use of acquire lease. So during that time period when the acquire lease is enabled, you won't be able to access the resource, and once you are done with whatever you want to do, you can just break the lease. So now if I just click on break the lease, and now if I select the option, so you can see the delete is enabled. So that is the use of acquiring a lease on particular blob. The next is there is an option to create a snapshot of data. So whenever you are doing some operation, suppose your application modifies the data, it has a state to maintain, and on a particular time it is going to update it, then again doing some operation, then again updating it. So to maintain that state, so you can create a snapshot of data at a particular point of time. If I just click on the create snapshot, now it has successfully created snapshot, and if I click on the resource and see view snapshot, you can see there are two snapshot which I have already created earlier, and the second one is that we just created. Now if I just click on this file, and if I just click on edit, so now I'll update the status. I have updated the content of this file and save it. So now if I click on this file and again create the snapshot of it, and I will just create a I will see the view snapshot present. So now we have three snapshot of this file, and if I click on the latest version of that file, so when you click on any of the snapshot that is present, so I'll just click on this one, and if I just scroll here, and you have on the right side option to download the snapshot. If I just download the snapshot, so this is the latest file that we have, which is I have updated content. And if I just click on the second version of this the previous version basically, so if you see the old content here, so that's how you are going to maintain the state of the files, which is called as the snapshot of the file. And if you have the option enabled, which is soft delete, so once you have the soft delete option enabled, so you are going to see the deleted snapshot as well. So that was all about how you can access storage account, how you can create a blob, and how you can access it. So now we have all the options here. Now let's go to queues, and we don't have any queues present, so I'll just create one queue. So now we have created queue, and so in a practical scenario, what will happen is we will create a queue, and some application component will send a message into this queue, and it will be fetched by some application component asynchronously. So that's what how you are going to use this queue. But for now, let's create a message and send it. So test data, you can have any JSON data that you can send, and you can decrypt that JSON when the message is received at the receiver's end. But for now, we can create from the portal. So here you can see the expiry, that time you can set here. So let's say I say it is going to get expired within the 10 seconds, and if I just send it, now you can see that the data is present in this queue, and the expiry that we have set is 10 seconds. So if I just refresh, Now you can see it is automatically dequeued from the message queue. So that's what the expiry of that particular queue defines. So that's all about how you can access the queue. So in a practical scenario, as we discussed, so we can create a queue and send a message, and it can be accessed by some other components and fetch the data and access it. So that's all about the introduction to Azure Storage and what are the different storage services that Azure provides, and how you can create containers, and how you can create queues, how you can have a storage account in place which will provide you different kinds of services. Thank you.